we went out that night, and I remember meeting a couple of these individuals, and one of them, and of course you wouldn't know who the hell they were at the time, was this, Polynesian giant defensive tackle, Dwayne Johnson. Yeah, I think I partied with The Rock and Warren Sapp on my recruiting trip to Miami.
Your first drink out in a club in Miami with The Rock. I mean, my next guest on Soup with Coop is someone who I have not seen in nearly 24 years. We were hanging out at the Downtown Athletic Club in New York at the Heisman Trophy presentation, and neither one of us won that night, Ryan, but welcome to Soup with Coop, Ryan Leaf. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I got my soup. You know how funny this is this was meant to be, because I have my meals delivered to me every day, and guess what today's lunch was?
Tell me.
Chicken, creamy tomato and chicken soup was lunch today. So this was meant to be.
I'm having a little tomato soup today. Taste it. Tell me how they deliver it hot for you, or you have to heat it up?
I have to heat it up. But it's very good. Very good.
And I have someone help me with my soup. She always puts a little grilled cheese in there. I mean, that right there.
Here's my little wedge of
hell, that's, it's no better way to start. Are you a soup lover?
I'm not a lover, but there are some moments where I'm at a restaurant or I'll just be craving and I'm a cream-based soup. So I'm like a cream of mushroom, tomato. I like a lobster, maybe a creamy lobster bisque, something like that. I'm more of a kind of a cream-based soup connoisseur.
Well, you look like you're not eating a lot of cream. You look good. You look like you're lean and mean right now. What are you weighing right now, Ron?
I'm about 225, 230. And that's a big difference for me. About a year ago, July 3rd, saw a picture of myself with my kiddo, and I felt I looked bloated, angry. And you know this better than anybody, having children. Once you do, you want to be around as long as you can for them. So I was stuck at home in the pandemic. And I talked to a nutrition friend of mine who also ran like a meal delivery service. He said, let's try this. And it turns out it was all the food I was consuming. Dropped like 70 pounds in a matter of 6 months and have maintained it since. Much more energy. My mental acuity, I feel like, is much better. I'm more articulate. And I have more energy to run around with that 3.5-year-old, and it's made a huge difference. So, and I do like the physical benefits. I like that I have smaller fitting clothes. I like that my joints don't bother me anymore when I'm, chasing him around and stuff like that. So this was, a forward evolution for me and needed to be done.
You mentioned having children and running around. When you were growing up in Montana, were you into every sport? Were you an athlete at out of the gates and competitive and in playing everything? Yeah.
My dad was a quarterback for his local high school team, went off to play at college. Didn't really work out, came back home, got drafted, served a couple tours in Vietnam, and then they raised 3 boys, and he just loved sports. He didn't force us into doing anything. He just had a basketball hoop out in the front yard. We had a little baseball diamond set up in the front yard with wiffle ball games. And then, he just followed us around, flag football, basketball tournaments, got me playing golf. I mean, it was baseball. It was just sport to sport. It wasn't that focus like we see a lot of kids these days that are just focusing on one sport. And I thought it helped me a ton in terms of my athleticism.
Were you a good player, Ryan? Were you always at kind of the first pick when they're choosing sides, or were you a late bloomer?
No, I was lanky and tall and athletic, good hand-eye coordination. When I speak around the country, you'll like this, and I'm sure your family will like this. I start off my speeches about being from Montana and how small it is and everything like that. And I say, I'm the only first-round draft pick ever from the state of Montana. And then I punctuate it with, there are more first-round draft picks in the Manning family than the whole state of Montana ever. So that gets a good chuckle out of everybody. Kind of, my speeches are a little intense, but it gets them to chuckle and understand that we're there to enjoy our time with another. It's amazing. It's weird to be the only one ever from your state. I didn't really have a trailblazer. I was just incredibly competitive, had to try to win at everything, and had two younger brothers, just like you, who I could, bounce around with and play with and compete with, and it was a wonderful childhood around sports.
My parents were constantly breaking up fights between, Eli wasn't really in the fighting situation. He was a little too young, but Peyton and I were at each other's throat. Were you all, when it got to 18 in the backyard and the hoops game, was blood coming before someone hits 20?
Yeah. I'm 3.5 years older than my middle brother, but then I'm a full 9 years older than Brady. I don't know if you remember this picture from the Heisman Trophy ceremony of I think you're over to the left a little bit further, and then there's my little brother either in the middle, right next to Eli, and our parents had dressed them, right? And it was just like a plaid shirt with a striped tie and just nonsense. And I always bring it out to show my brother, Brady, because, my mom, we had never done anything cool, like went to New York and your son was up for a trophy like that, but she thought she was dressing them the best she could. And it's an always constant reminder and a way to poke a little fun at the baby brother about his wardrobe during the Heisman Trophy.
I must admit, we still talking about that outfit. I've been kind of waiting for that to come back in style. I thought Brady was just ahead of his time.
I like it.
You remember also about that night in downtown, remember Randy Moss was there. It was y'all four, you, Charles, Woodson, and Peyton and Randy. And Randy wore sunglasses the whole night. You remember that?
Yeah. I think a lot of people, there was swirlings around him going pro and failing a drug test and things like that. So I think a lot of people projected onto him like it must have had something. What was going on, and we later found out with Randy, is that he was having kind of a real significant anxiety attack, and it made him feel comfortable, like having the glasses on, and because he talks about he was there with Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf and Charles Woodson. He didn't know if he belonged. He was so worried about ESPN bringing up his past travails, and it was just an uncomfortable situation. And of course, I wish I would have known more about this, and it could have been a comfort to him. It was a unreal night. I knew I wasn't going to win. I assumed Peyton was, and I was just there to, relish in the fact that Washington State was getting some recognition. The only Washington State player ever invited to the Heisman Trophy ceremony, the highest finishing player. So it was a special night for me, my family, representing Washington State, representing Montana, Mike Price, our head coach. And then I was just awfully cool to spend time with the likes of Charles Woodson and Randy Moss and Peyton Manning. I was in awe.
Football season is here, and nothing beats seeing your favorite team live. Not only does Vivid Seats have great NFL ticket prices, they're also the official ticketing partner of ESPN. And with Vivid Seats rewards, when you buy 10 tickets, you get the 11th free. Download the app or visit vividseats.com today. Vivid Seats, life happens live. Receive a reward credit equal to the average price of 10 tickets purchased, excluding taxes, fees, and processing costs. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions.
Flashing back to Montana, not a competitive, high school football as you see in Florida and Texas and everywhere. I mean, obviously, not a ton of people getting recruited. What was your recruiting like? And then were you a Washington State fan? Who was your football team?
The Colorado Buffaloes. That's where I wanted to go. They
were good.
When I was a freshman in high school, there was a senior linebacker who was getting recruited by Division I schools, and getting recruited by a Division I school in Montana was big business. He usually went to the FCS, Montana State, Weber State, things like that. So he went to the University of Colorado, and I remember going on my first unofficial visit there, going to Boulder. They were still in the Big Eight. Nebraska came, Tommy Frazier. Colorado had Cordell Stewart. I'm like, I gotta come here. And then when I went on my visit, Coy Detmer was in line, and I just was like, am I ever going to play here? I didn't know, but I got recruited by pretty much everybody. I took visits to the University of Miami. Washington State, Colorado State, Colorado, had Oregon, UCLA on tap. So they were able to find me in little old Montana. There was a lot of Montana ties. Dennis Erickson was at Miami. He had played at Montana State, had married a Great Falls, Montana girl, which is where I'm from. Dave Arnold, who was the recruiting coordinator down there, had coached at Montana State. Sonny Lubick had Montana ties at Colorado State. Brian Cabral at Colorado. And then the day of the Rose Bowl, it was UCLA and Wisconsin, January 1st, 1994. Mike Price, the head coach for Washington State, just on a random recruiting call, I think. I don't know if he had really a huge objective or motive, called me and asked what I was doing. And I said, I'm watching the Rose Bowl. And he said, I'll make you a deal, Brian. You come here to Washington State. We'll play in that game together. And I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. I walked into mom and dad's bedroom, looked at them and said, I'm going to Washington State. They kind of looked at me and they were happy because it was close enough to home, but I think far enough away where I could start to develop some independence. But I also hadn't done any research. Hadn't realized they hadn't been to a Rose Bowl since 1931, Coop. 67 years it would be. But
that's a good recruiter right there. That's a really good recruiter.
Great choice. Mike Price was like a second father to me, taught me how to play the quarterback position. We did something that hadn't been done there in forever. It made history. A lot of great accomplishments. That team will be remembered forever. Really, really special. Really proud to have played there, gone to school there, got my degree there. As you can see, I still represent as much as I can when I can.
You mentioned going on a visit to Miami. What the heck happens on a visit to Miami in the early 90s? You got to share something. I mean, who was your host? Who was there? Those teams were star-studded.
Yeah, Bryce Erickson, so Dennis's son, was there as a walk-on quarterback. But Ryan Costa Ryan Collins and Frank Costa were the quarterbacks. They were just coming off the national championship. Warren Sapp was there like as a sophomore. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was like a sophomore or junior. And this is a story I've told a lot, where we went out that night. And of course, after we got done eating dinner with the coaching staff, they take us out and about in Coral Gables. And I never drank alcohol in my life. They took me to Dan Marino's bar. I had a rum and Coke and probably fell over a few minutes later. But we were in and out of cars going to places. And I remember meeting a couple of these individuals, and one of them, and of course you wouldn't know who the hell they were at the time, was this, Polynesian giant defensive tackle, Dwayne Johnson. And he would go on to be The Rock and be the highest paid movie star in the world. And there I am. And, I think it was January of 94 on a recruiting trip to Miami. Now I have a story years later. Like, I think I partied with The Rock and Warren Sapp on my recruiting trip to Miami.
Your first drink out in a club at Miami with The Rock. I mean,
yeah. It's a pretty good one. I was so hungover the next day, I didn't make it to hardly any of my academic meetings. Eric Price, Mike Price's son, was the GA down there, ironically enough. And I apparently just kind of slept on his couch in his little office there at the University of Miami in their facility for most of the day. Dennis was very honest with me when we went through our exit interview. He said, if there's a professional job that comes, I'm going to take a hard look at it. Sure enough, the Seattle Seahawks job came about, and he jumped at that. And he also said that the recruiting coordinator saw me more as a tight end, maybe linebacker. And that's pretty honest. And I was such a fish out of water. I was like in cut off jeans and a flannel shirt on South Beach. It was not a fit for me. I belonged in the wheat fields and the rolling hills of Pullman or Boulder, Colorado, or Fort Collins, Colorado. That's where I belong.
I know maybe it doesn't make sense as much when you're from, the West, but were you just a country boy, just a small town country kid? And
yep.
The bright lights were too bright.
Yeah, I just didn't know about it. And I didn't know what the bright lights were. I grew up on the Missouri River, hunting the Rocky Mountains, fishing, playing outdoors, wasn't a video game guy. Me and my two younger brothers and all our friends on the block, we had a football field in our backyard, a baseball diamond at the end of our block. I mean, it we were just outdoors kids in a state that had about 750,000 people, in a state that's huge. It's the fourth largest state in the country, but just no people. And, it was, I tell a lot of people all the time, especially when my career went so south and my behaviors became an issue, that I wish I could have just, when the narrative started going the other way, like this guy wears the black hat, I always wish I would have been able to just say, hey, I'm not that guy. I'm just this kind of, redneck hick from Montana who just wants to play sports and be liked. And, I wasn't ever able to do that. And that's exactly who I was. I was just this kid who wanted to play sports, compete, and I wanted people to like me.
Ryan, it's funny you mentioned that, because we're traveling around and seeing some of these college towns, and the infrastructure, especially as you get into these really big programs, they have mental health coaches on staff where and they were talking about how there was a little stigma if you wanted to go visit one. Now everybody goes. It's not
right.
It's not if you're having problems, this is here for you. It's everybody goes and meets with a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a mental health coach and just talks about things, gets things, hey, this is a big change. I'm living here, and all of a sudden now I'm on my own, living in this college town. I got freedom, but I've got responsibility, and it's a lot to handle. Did you struggle at Washington State out of the gates, just kind of handling that? I mean, it was one thing to the pros, but even the transition from small town high school to Pac-10, competitiveness has got to be.
I think, especially when you're so wooed and courted by these coaches and everybody, you just assume when you walk on staff, like, hey, remember me? Remember how much you love me? And now they're like, hey, you got to be up at 6 a.m. to do your workout with the freshmen. You're going to redshirt. You're going to run the scout team. We got games to win here. I can't be worrying about you right now. That was really difficult, right? And because I just assumed, they love me, right? They love me so much. They just begged and pleaded for me to come here and let me walk on campus. And they're calling me Baby Bledsoe. And I'm just like, yeah, this is how we're going to roll. No. And, then I just kind of wanted to compete. So I didn't go to school. I didn't take my classes seriously. My GPA, my freshman first semester was really bad. It was extremely difficult transition. There were no alternatives of mental health or guidance or anything. It was just tough love and got to get through it. And, I get it. I get nowadays the transfer portal and things being that way, you impulsively act. And do something like that, you jump to where you think the grass is greener. I think it made me a stronger individual, having to deal with adversity, overcome it, win the job, become the leader of that team. That was definitely, and I did start the final year there. I started seeing a kind of a sports psychologist that they had on staff there, but it really wasn't around. I remember going to him at night after watching film, and we would work on visualization stuff, more like visualizing a tighter spiral, things like we weren't talking about actual emotional growth and emotional health that I think is present for players now than it was then.
You get drafted, second pick. Obviously, you and Peyton are kind of back and forth. Who's the number one guy? When you're amazing success in college. Were you confident in your ability, or did you also kind of sense I might be a little more fragile than they think I am at that time? Can you remember? Can you think back?
Yeah, I was extremely confident, right? I was so confident that I was like, I don't care if Indianapolis doesn't take me one. Peyton and I are 1A and 1B. Whoever you're going to get the guy. And Peyton and I are going to spend the next decade and a half fighting each other for the AFC Championship every year. That's how I envisioned it. I thought I was exactly where I was supposed to be. This was destined. This was where it was supposed to be. And I was excited for it. I was naive to what was about to come, the scrutiny, the pressure, dealing with failure in a healthy, positive way. I had no idea how to do that the right way. And it's still, Peyton probably gets sick and tired of me asking him these things when we see each other 24 years removed. But I always, whenever I'm around him, I always keep, asking him how he did it. because I couldn't. It was so hard. And there's a reason why there's only, 10 or 12 every year that are probably extremely, who do well and get it done. So, I just, I was incapable, and it's not a slight. It's the hardest thing to do in the world, but short story here. That final year when Peyton and he was a senior and I was a junior, and our names started getting attached to one another, I remember reaching out to my sports information director and asking if he would reach out to Peyton's and if he and I could get on the phone and have a conversation. And if you remember correctly, there's no such thing as cell phones, or like you had to be home on a landline to have that call, right? So we had it was planned, and I was like, oh my God, Peyton Manning's going to be calling, or we're going to be talking to Peyton Manning tonight. And I remember picking up the headset and hearing that and hearing your drawl a little bit today and hearing his for the first time on that phone call. I was just like, wow, we were 21-year-old kids, no idea what was ahead, and we're going to be attached at the hip for the rest of our lives. And I look back on that fondly. The way he treated me, the way he's continued to treat me, the way your mom, Olivia, and Archie treated my parents during the whole process, the draft process, when things went poorly for me, and I struggled. I think probably Peyton might be the one person that I would realistically hold a resentment against, but I don't. I'm incredibly proud of him.
It's no secret that we've always been pulling for you. I mean, we've had a great time in New York back in the day, and competition's one thing, but also just being a good guy and pulling for guys you compete against. That's what makes it. I mean, playing people that you don't, that are inferior to you, that's not competition. It's guys going against guys who, were good players. I remember those games, when you're a rookie playing on bad teams, which you and Peyton were. There's a reason. There's a reason you have the number 1 and number 2 pick in the draft, because you're not very good. And I remember those games those were kind of the biggest games of the year. That rookie year when we're facing off. And so,
it was a good game. We played each other in the preseason.
Yeah,
and then got back at it in the regular season. And it was a pretty darn good game. I've been beat over the head so much in my life telling me how bad a player I was. I went back and watched the game the other day because they were showing some throwback highlights from that matchup. And it boosted my self-worth a little bit because I played pretty darn well. We got a touchdown taken away because our offensive lineman was off the line a little bit, so we didn't have enough players on the offensive line. I threw a couple other dimes and I competed against one of the greatest and I felt better about it because I just, you just get beat over the head for so long about how bad you were, you're this bust and all of those things. So sometimes it's good to remember what a cool experience. And I remember seeing the picture after the game, and boy, Peyton and I, we were so young. We were so young. We have acne all over our faces still, and we're just like children in this man's world. It's neat to reminisce and have stories like that.
Right. I want to ask you about that. There's a feeling anytime I don't care whether you're in 8th grade and you're playing a quarterback or you're the point guard or hitting third and shortstop, and you walk into a room, whether it's a classroom, a homeroom, an assembly or a cocktail party or wherever, you got a little skip in your step, and you probably had that for the bulk of your life. And I was wondering, when you walk into a room as a quarterback and all of a sudden things weren't going right, there was wind in your face and you were getting probably more trouble than you deserve, more from the media. But was that an awkward, when you went places, were you fighting being the same person you were, just holding your head high?
Yeah. I had some narcissistic personality where I felt like everything had to be about me. And sometimes, as the elite athletes, it's a razor's edge. So when I would go into rooms, especially after I'd gone and, played so poorly, where there were Hall of Famers or Super Bowl champs or successful players at the time, and I felt less than and judged. I feared that. I feared all those things, and it probably wasn't the case. People probably weren't looking at me, talking about me, or thinking about me. I made it about me. So, I was scared that please don't recognize me, please don't recognize me, please don't recognize me. And then like 15 minutes later, I'm thinking, why the hell isn't anybody recognizing me? It's like that, it's that narcissistic personality that reared its ugly head a ton for me. And yeah, it was a struggle. I still there were three things, like the ideals of success for me, where I thought were money, power, and prestige. And I had succeeded. I had gotten there. So I just thought I was more important than a lot of people simply because I could play this game and I was rich and famous and everything. I had the wrong priorities. And, when you have all that money, when you have a ton of money, what that does is it just exposes your character defects. That's what it does. And I didn't realize the magnitude and magnifying glass and the scrutiny that was going to come with it, and how those behaviors would project onto everybody else. And that's what made it such a struggle. And most people can figure that stuff out through time. It took an incredible humbling on my part to get to that place where I was okay with who I was. What other people thought of me was none of my business. It was growing pains that took a lot longer than the average guy, I think. And I'm grateful for it. It was hard as hell. I'm grateful for it now at 45, and a father, and all those things. I'm grateful for it.
Was there anyone along the way who tried to let you know you were acting, like an?
Yeah, there were plenty. There were plenty. Right. When I walk into the room with those football players and I tell my story, I was exactly where you guys were 24 years ago. And I had guys come in and talk to me too. And I would always kind of think, yeah, wow, that's an amazing story, but that's not going to be me. I mean, no way that's going to be me. And I think that's the response a lot I get, but I try to stay out of that result. I just try to be part of the solution and go in and talk about what solution-based things you can do and what things you can control. So when something like this similarly happens, maybe, or comes along, you actually have the tools. Junior Seau was a guy that tried. Rodney Harrison, and I just didn't latch on. I should have just grabbed a hold of their belt loop, followed them around like a little kid, figured out how to be a professional, because they wanted me to succeed. They really did. When I got to Tampa under Tony Dungy, and I had that crew, that defense, who would go on to win a Super Bowl in the next couple of years, that's when I finally kind of figured out how to be a professional. Injuries had bottled up and had become an issue where I wasn't as talented, because guess what? Doesn't matter how well your mind works. Eventually, if the talent doesn't equal what you're doing on the football field, you're going to be found out quick. You're not going to be able to get it done. So there were many. John Elway reached out. There were plenty of people that offered the hand, and I pretty much just slapped it away.
All right, people, we're brought to you by Caesars Sportsbook, the greatest sports betting app of all time. See, it's not just about the daily promos, odd boosts, or the hundreds of ways to wager. It's about the immortal words of Caesar himself: you bet, you get with Caesars Rewards. Every bet you place on the app, no matter the outcome, earns towards exclusive perks at Caesars Rewards destinations everywhere: hotel stays, concert tickets, bonuses, and more. Download the Caesars Sportsbook app, become a Caesars Rewards member today, and get more with every wager. Must be 21 or older to gamble. Gambling problem? Call or text 1-800-522-4700.
Ron, I'm curious now that you're, broadcasting college football games and paying attention to what's going on with the new NIL, where, college players are getting paid. Do you think this is a good recipe for some guys to come in all of a sudden, and it's pressure to figure out where English class is and try to make lifting and get to practice on time and get some sleep. And now you throw a pocket full of money on top of it. It seems like it's a recipe for even more trouble, not only individually, but even as a team, with jealousies in the locker room. I'm curious your take on how you think you would have handled some money in your pocket in Pullman before even,
Well, I may have gotten found out a little earlier and got to get put on the right track. I do believe players need to be compensated for their name, image, and likeness. It's just too much money out there going by the wayside when only 1% of the 1% will make it to the next level. So I do believe that needs to happen. How this is moderated, what the oversight is on it, I don't know. You have Nick Saban, in his best Nick Saban, stepping up in front of the Texas High School Association's conference in the summer, talking about his quarterback who hadn't played it down just because he's got the brand of Alabama, signing for over, almost $1 million worth of NIL. That's crazy talk. I'm not going to try to cap it on anybody. It's an open market, and I want it to be that way. There's something to the innocence of college football that I love so much. I never thought once about when my jersey was hanging in the bookstore on campus and people were wearing it, or my likeness was on the video game. I just thought that was just freaking cool. And if you told me I could play 20 games in a season, I wasn't going, hey, I didn't sign up to play 20 games in a season. This is not what this is about. I was like, yeah, let's play 30. I don't care. It's a different mentality. The evolution of the college athlete has changed, and it's always going to be that way. And the fear of the unknown is scary. And I think that's where we're at right now. The NCAA has done an incredibly poor job over the last 2 decades of getting us ready in what the evolution will look like. And that's unfortunate.
Ryan, I want to let you know that I can't thank you enough for being on the show today. We have a history. I can tell you that speaking on at least on behalf of my family, that we're proud of you.
Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot. You guys have been a meaningful part of my life. Peyton, of course. I'm still kind of a shocks kid when it comes to guys that were incredibly successful, and they are. And what he's doing after his career, we're it's ironic. I saw him when I called the Tennessee Georgia State game, that crazy upset on Rocky Top, and I got to meet his son and see him on the field. And I remember buddy of mine posting the picture, and I'm going, hey, just a couple dads now catching a game on Rocky Top. That's what we are. So I love it. I'm glad I'm here to experience it, because for the longest time I didn't think that was a possibility. So I appreciate you, Coop. I appreciate your whole family. Thanks for letting me be a part of this. This is pretty cool, man.
As always, Ryan, I like everybody to have a little bite of cold soup at the end and just kind of see on a scale of 1 to 1,000, what your rating is today, 1,000 being the best.
This is really good. I'm going to say this is like 950, even cold. This is a shredded chicken in here with the tomato soup, and I'm loving it. Thanks. And this was meant to be.
Well, it's ironic that you picked 950. That's exactly what I got on my SAT. So I appreciate you thinking of me.
I can't remember what I got on my SAT. I'm pretty close to you, I think. I might have been like 875 or something like that.
I don't think anybody was trying to copy off either one of us.
No, I just needed to get the number enough to get me to college. Kind of like the Wonderlic. Me and Peyton, we were in there taking it at the same time. I think we both got the same score. We're just like, this is nonsense. Let's go.
Thank you, my friend. Really enjoyed it.
You bet.